Now let's try to understand where does India stand with respect to robotics today. If you look at this particular picture on your screen, this is a picture that has been taken from World Robotics Report of 2020. And from this report, what you can see is if we compare ourselves to the most powerful economies of the world, we actually don't stand even in the top economies. For example, if you look at this, you have China, Japan, USA, Korea, Germany, Italy, France, Chinese Taipei, and Mexico. All these countries basically have done better with respect to installation of industrial robots. So that's why we can say that today India is not really in a position to compete with the most powerful economies of the world. And that's why if you look at the industries in India, if you look at the various sectors in India, you will see that the penetration of digitization in India has not been great. The digitization that has happened in most of the industries in India is very basic compared to what we have seen in the other powerful economies. Not only this, most of the markets today in India still remain unstructured. And this is also one of the reasons why we have not seen a lot of robotics coming into various sectors today. Now, if you try to analyze Indian industries, for example, if you take a report that was submitted by the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise, that is MSME Industries, according to that report, there are approximately 50 million MSMEs in India. Out of this industry gives approximately 45% of industrial output and is responsible for approximately 40% exports from India. So 40% of exports and 45% of industrial output just comes from the MSME industries. There are 50 million MSMEs today in India. Now, if you look at the penetration of robotics in all these industries, you'll find that we probably are nowhere. And this is one of the areas where there is a huge scope of robotics to enter and completely change the entire output. The output can be increased, the efficiency can be increased. Actually, what we generally think is that a lot of jobs will be lost to robotics, but that will not be the case here. Because of the expansion that will be possible because of introduction of robotics in all these industries, we'll see that a lot more jobs will be created in these industries if robotics are introduced into the MSMEs. Not only this, even if you consider the industries where we are using robotics in India, for example, if you consider the auto sector, or if you consider the generic drug industry in India, or even if you consider the Indian IT sector, in all these sectors, what we have seen is that robotics has penetrated the Indian market. But even with that, what we have observed is although robotics is being used, the robots are not made in India. So what is happening is that most of these industries are actually using vendors which are foreign. They rely heavily on foreign vendors. So what issue we see here is, first of all, the penetration of robotics in India is very low. Secondly, even if we have certain areas or certain sectors where robotics has entered the Indian markets, even then the robots that are being used, they are not India made robots. They have been acquired from somewhere. They have been taken from foreign vendors. So that's why there is a huge scope of robotics taking off in India. We have certain companies which are working on robotics in India. If they are able to compete with the foreign markets, if they are able to compete with the foreign vendors, then in that case, they will be in a position to supply the robots, or the industrial robots rather, to the industrial sectors in India. And if this happens, then in that case, we'll see that not only job creations will happen because of introduction of robotics in various sectors, but we'll also see that because of these companies taking off well, we'll see that a lot more revenues will be generated by these companies. And this is perhaps the way in which the Make in India project of the government of India can also penetrate the robotics industry or the automation industry in India. So these are two factors that we need to understand with respect to what we have seen today in the Indian markets. So one of the reports also has said that if you look at the years 2020 to 2025, there will be a compounded annual growth rate of 13.3% in the sector of robotics. The compounded annual growth rate in the case of robotics will be 13.3%. This is one of the values that has been given in one of the reports. So these are few of the things with respect to the Indian industries today and the Indian scenario with respect to robotics. And this is something that will also drive the future of robotics in India. In the next few years, or rather I would say the next couple of decades, we might see that robotics in India will enter in a huge number, and we'll be able to see the application of robotics in various sectors in India, in various segments of the industries in India. So this is what we know of robotics. But before discussing the future, or where can robotics come handy for the Indian industries, let's try to understand what are the challenges that we have in the sector of robotics in India today. So what are these challenges? The first challenge is lack of hardware ecosystem. We just discussed that we are not producing a lot of robots in India. Even if robots are being used in some of the sectors, we are taking it from foreign vendors. So what does it mean? That a lot of hardware has to be imported. It simply means that it becomes very difficult for somebody to even think of having robotics or implementing robotics in some areas or in some sectors, because you will have to get all these robots from foreign vendors, and that also includes the cost that comes with it. So that's why it overall increases the entire process cost, and because of that the process would not want to incur so much of high cost. So that's why we are looking at the alternatives. That's why we are hesitant in going to robotics for these industries. Then after that, financial incentives. If you talk about the imported robots, first of all, there will be an 18% GST that will be put. And apart from that, almost we see that 7.5% of general custom duty will have to be paid because of the import. So in total, we are talking about approximately 25.5%, approximately 25 to 26% of taxes that will have to be paid by anyone who is importing the hardware from a foreign vendor. So that's another problem. So first of all, we are not producing anything in India. Second, even if you are getting it from outside, you incur a lot of cost, and that also is a big problem that you face. So that again becomes a big issue. Then after that, critical human resource, or rather you would say the absence of human resource in India. Because of the lack of opportunities that we have in India with respect to robotics, anyone who is even in the field of robotics would perhaps look for a better career opportunity and move abroad. And they might be working for some industries, some organization, some educational institute, but not in India. So that's why we are lacking this human resource that would be very, very important at the center of if we want to develop something in India. So that's another issue that we are facing. Then apart from that, lack of required knowledge. We don't really know where all we can fit robotics. What are the areas where expansion of industries can happen if robotics were introduced into the market? So that is another issue that we are facing. And then mindset shift is required, because this is something that will also become a big political issue. Irrespective of who is at the center or who is in the opposition, at least one of them will be favoring robotics or introduction of robotics in India. And if one is favoring the introduction of robotics, the other will be against it. And this is an unfortunate thing that will always happen. So a lot has to be done from this perspective also, that we need a political consensus if at all we need to introduce robotics into the Indian market. Each and everyone needs to understand how exactly can we use robotics, what are the sectors where we can use it, and how can we ensure that it does not lead to any of the negative impacts. It does not lead to loss of jobs. It does not lead to anything that can be harmful for humans or for the economy in general. So we have to understand that each and everything has to be taken into consideration, and then only will be in a position to make sure that we can introduce robotics into the Indian markets, and we can make good use, judicious use of robotics in India. Now let's have a look at some of the concerns that we have with regards to robots. The first point is change in manufacturing process. What do we mean here? Since the time that we have seen robots have been manufactured in large numbers, there hasn't been much change in the process that is being used. So maybe we can make the process more efficient. We can perhaps make it more power efficient. So there are number of ways in which we can look at the various ways in which the process of manufacturing of robots can be improved. Then after that, biohybrid and bio-inspired robots. What do we mean by biohybrid robots? Here we are talking about robots which are able to mimic the way in which our system works, the human system works. So including maybe biological systems or synthetic tissues which will mimic the way in which muscular system in our body works, and maybe it will be able to enhance the working of the robots. Then after that, bio-inspired robots. What we mean by bio-inspired robots is when you are trying to mimic the nature. When you are trying to mimic the nature and you are trying to make robots which will make use of all the efficient ways in which nature works. And if that can be replicated in robots, that will also help in enhancing the way in which robots work today. Then after that, power consumption. Today what we see is that robots are very inefficient in a manner that they consume power. We see that there is an inefficiency in which the power consumption is happening in manufacture of robots. So not only manufacture but rather also in the use of the robots. So this is again one area where we can improve upon the robots in future. Then after that, robot swarms, meaning that whenever you are using a lot of robots together, whenever you are using a set of robots together, in this the coordination between the robots has to be better. There has to be a better coordination so that the robots can work efficiently. So we are basically talking about a better coordination. Then after that, the next concern is navigation and exploration. What exactly do we mean here? This is basically about navigation and exploration of their environment, so that they understand their environment better, so that they are able to improve upon the functionalities in which they behave. They should be able to even recognize new areas. They should be able to recognize even poorly mapped functionalities, so that in a manner everything that is there in the surrounding, they should be able to map their surroundings better. They should be able to respond to their surroundings better. Now it's not that we have not improved upon these areas. For example, today we have self-driving cars, but there are scopes of a lot of improvements that can happen in these areas. So that's why navigation and exploration of their environments, or the understanding of their environments, is also very, very important for the future. Then after that, AI and robotics, the use of artificial intelligence in robotics. And this also becomes very, very important for any system that is automated. The automated systems should be able to work without human intervention. They should be able to adapt to their surroundings, and they should be able to learn about their surroundings. And this is where AI, or artificial intelligence, also becomes very, very crucial for robotics. Then after that, brain computer interfaces. Basically here we are talking about computers that can be directly linked with human brain, so that a kind of a guidance can be provided by humans without having to program them much, without having to make them learn a lot about their surroundings. So in a manner, efficiency of the robots can be improved if these kind of systems can be made. The BCI systems, as we say, brain computer interfaces, this is something that also can lead to a better future for the robotics. Then after that, social interaction. And social interaction perhaps is one of the biggest challenges. You cannot make the robot learn or behave in a manner that humans do. They perhaps will not understand the emotions, correct? And this is one of the biggest challenges that the work is going to face in development of robotics. Then after that, medical robotics. Today we have seen that there are surgeries where robots are being used, and this is perhaps going to increase in future. But at the same time, we do not have robots that can go for routine procedures, who can take care of procedures where perhaps they would have only to call a surgeon or a doctor when there is a patient specific step required. So in that case, again, we will be able to increase the efficiency of the healthcare sectors, and perhaps will be able to increase the efficiency of the healthcare sector in this manner. We'll be able to employ more robots, and will be able to make better use of our doctors in future. Then after that, robot ethics and security. And this is again one of the bigger concerns with regards to robots today. Now, what all could happen? For example, what we can observe, or what may happen, is that robots may entirely take over humans, correct? Wherever you needed somebody to supervise the work, perhaps you don't need a manager anymore, but rather you are making the use of robots, and you are using the automation services that can entirely replace the human use in such cases. Then apart from that, what else can happen? We might see that accountability of humans may reduce. What may start to happen is that people who are responsible for one job or the other, they might stop taking the responsibility and say that, look, this was something that was to be done by the robot, or the robot was responsible for something like this, and they may completely do away with the accountability that they have. So this is something else that can happen. One of the biggest concerns is that unemployment or de-skilling of labor force may happen. This is again a big concern with regards to ethics or security with regards to robots. Then after that, unethical use of robots and artificial intelligence may happen. We may not use it for something that is constructive. That is a big concern that is associated with robots and also with artificial intelligence. So because of all these things, we do say that robot ethics today is one of the biggest concern that the world is facing. With the automation industry booming, with all over the world, we are looking at a lot of areas, lot of sectors which are employing robotics. So with so much of development happening in this sector, there are chances that we might stop looking at the ethical point of view. We might overlook all the ethical concerns, and this will be a major problem in the coming future if it is not checked in time. Then after that, occupational safety and health implications are there. We need to understand that whether it's a safe environment wherever humans and robots are working together. The materials that are being used in the robots, are they good enough? Are they safe enough? Do they have any health implications? All these kind of areas also have to be pondered upon in a better manner. And then one last thing, building multifunctional robots. So today we see that most of the robots that are being used, they can be used only for one function or the other. They are being made very specifically, correct? So we have to understand that future of robotics also lies in multifunctionality of robots. If there is a single robot that can work in various environments, that can do various functions, then in that case this robot will be of much better use as compared to the robots which are highly specialized. So this is again something that has to be looked upon, and this is a concern of the present, that the robots that we have today are pretty much single functionality robots, very specialized robots. And if we are able to build multi-functionality robots, then in that case we'll be able to build a better future. So these are some of the concerns that we have with regards to robotics today. Then as we discussed, we need to understand what is the future of robotics in India. Today, as we discussed, that there are only a couple of sectors where robotics is functioning well. But if you look at the future, there are a lot of ways in which robotics can be made use of. So if we look at the future, first of all, we have to identify the first wave technologies. What do we mean by first wave technologies? We basically mean the kinds of technologies, the kinds of sectors that will basically start the work of robotics in India, that will guide the way of robotics in India, that will be the first few sectors to take the work of robotics in India. So for example, when we discuss about the IT industry today, or the generic drugs that are using robotics today, so these are kind of first wave technologies, but we have to identify all the technologies, all the sectors that will be the first few sectors to take robotics into India. Then after that, optimization of resources. Once robotics is introduced, it will help in optimization of resources. We will be able to use the resources in a much better manner. We'll be able to improve the productivity, because you are using robots in all these areas where you just were making use of the mechanical work for a human. In all these cases, you will be able to enhance the productivity by the use of automation, by the use of robots. Then industrial robots are going to lead the way. Whether you talk about the assembly lines, you talk about welding, you talk about packaging, all these are the various areas where we can make the use of robots. So that's why industrial robots will start to lead the way. Then after that, academic support is required for a good future in India. Today we don't see a lot of areas of development. There are certain courses that have started. For example, we have seen in some engineering colleges, in IITs, where robotics is being taken very seriously, and this is something that is required, that you need academic support. You need to provide support to the students, you need to provide the infrastructure to the students who would be able to learn better, who would be able to apply the concepts better, and may become better engineers and scientists for a good development of robotics in India. So that's why this academic support becomes very, very important. Then after that, some specialization will be required in server engineering, in electrical, in embedded programming, in mechanical engineering. All these are the areas of engineering and science which are deeply related with robotics. And for robotics to develop well in India, this is again something that is required. So if we are looking into the future of robotics in India, These are areas specifically in science and engineering where we'll have to improve a lot, where we'll have to ensure that the students are learning well, where they are being provided the support that is required for their development. And then after that, ultimately, future of robotics in India is also in the safety and quality of products. Improvement in the safety of products, improvement in the quality of products, improvement in the safety of the people who are working in all these industries. This will also be very, very important for building a good future in India with regards to robotics. So that's why if we are trying to look at a bright future of robotics in India, these are some of the areas that we have to look into. These are the areas that will guide the robotics sector in India. These are the areas which will enhance the productivity of various sectors in India with the help of robotics and automation. So that's why all these are the various points that have to be kept in mind with regards to future of robotics in India. So this brings us to the end of this chapter of robotics. Just understand, although this is a small chapter, not a lot of concepts, but it can be a very crucial chapter for both your prelims and mains examination. What are robots? What are the components of robots? What are the applications of robots? What is happening with regards to robotics in India? Challenges with regards to robotics, future of robotics in India. All these are the concepts which can be asked in your mains examination as well. So you have to be prepared with all these things. So this is something that brings us to the end of this very chapter. Thank you very much for joining. We'll move on to the next segment now, which is artificial intelligence. Thank you.